All right, so we'll make a start. Firstly, I want to welcome everybody. It's my first meeting for governance, and it's actually my first meeting in the chamber, so it'll be interesting. So I'll pass over to Philip, John, sorry. He'll do the introduction there. The roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. To all members of Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, you're summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the committee, which will be a hybrid meeting to be conducted remotely via WebEx and physically in the chamber in the Guildhall today, Tuesday the 7th of June at 4 o'clock. Alderman Bresland.
Here, John.
Alderman Devaney.
Here, John.
Alderman McCready.
Here.
Alderman Wark. Councillor Raymond Bauer.
Here, John.
Councillor John Boyle.
Apologies, John.
Councillor Donnelly.
On shot.
Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Fleming. Councillor Heaney.
Sure, John.
Councillor McGinley.
Sure, John.
Councillor McHugh.
Sure.
Councillor Mooney.
Here.
And Councillor Tierney.
Here, John.
Thank you, members.
Perfect. That just moves us on now to item 3, which is the broadcasting statement. I'd like to remind everyone present at this meeting in the Guildhall or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on when speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the Council's privacy notice can be found on the Council website. So just moving to item 4, which is declarations of members' interests. If anybody has anything to declare, you can do it now or throughout the meeting.
Chair, can I record an interest as a member, a commissioner of Foilport?
It's noted. Perfect. Okay.
Chair,
So, yeah.
Chair, as a non-member of the committee, but I've got a similar interest as a commissioner in Foilport.
Okay. Thanks for that. So moving on to Chair's business. I haven't had anybody come to me with Chair's business. I would just like to pass on congratulations to the new team that's incoming in terms of the Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Chairs of committees and Deputy Chairs, and with some luck in the year going forward. So moving on to item 6, which is matters arising from the open minutes of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, which was held on Tuesday the 17th of May, pages 1 to 28. Is anybody any matters arising from that meeting? Nope. Okay, perfect. So moving on, item 7 is the year-end financial outturn for 2021 to 22. It'll be pages 29 to 46 in the pack, and I'll pass over to Alfie, who's going to give that report.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the report is for you to approve the draft financial outturn position, including proposed transfers to reserves for the year 21-22. The outturn report, members, obviously forms the very key component of our year-end accounts, which we need to submit to the Department by 30th of June. Those will subsequently be audited by the Northern Ireland Audit Office, with the final detailed accounts being presented to Audit Committee in September for approval. The governance statement, members, is a separate component but equally important, and that document will be reported separately to this month's meeting of Council's Audit Committee in advance of the accounts being submitted. So in relation to the outturn, the table in section 2.5, members, provide you with a bit of background in relation to our expenditure budgets that we agreed now over a year ago for this year. These budgets are then obviously split into the various directorates, and reports have been brought to you throughout the year in relation to expenditure against budget, and particular focusing on the issues which needed to be addressed. The last one of those reports came in March 22. There are obviously very significant uncertainties in respect of our finances at this time. The pandemic obviously continues to impact our income, continuing to cause exceptional costs, and there's also major uncertainty over our rates income. particularly due to non-domestic revaluation appeals and also more recent pressures developing members in relation to hardship, cost of living, inflation, contract pressures and staff pay pressures associated with the recent strike action and potential increases in employer pension costs. So the importance of having robust reserves is key at this time, members, particularly as we're now starting to embark on the rates process for 23-24, with a number of unprecedented recurrent challenges facing us going into that process. So having strong reserves is really critical. So with that background in mind, members, the detailed report for this year is attached at Appendix 1 and is summarised in the table in Section 3.1 of the report. And I suppose, members, thankfully, the first thing is that those significant risks for this year, 21-22, have again been fully mitigated by the significant government support that we've received, leaving us in a small overall surplus position of 68k. So 4 factors, members, I'll just run through, I suppose they're the key elements of that small surplus. Factor 1, we have a surplus in our services of expenditure of just over £1 million. Obviously, variances are very significant in our services at this point in time, both positive and negative, due to the obvious impacts of the pandemic. We have, thankfully, within that figure, received government funding of over 1.5 million to get us to that position to cover all our income losses and exceptional costs. That funding has come mainly from Department for Communities, but also some of that has come from DERA and furlough claims in the earlier part of the year. Apart from that, the key issues contributing to the positive variance includes our overhead savings, additional grants received in environmental health and energy, programme expenditure savings in festivals, business, museums and marketing, and as well as our planning and building control income continues to be well ahead of budget by, in combination, about 240k, which is something I suppose we definitely didn't anticipate at the start of the pandemic, and it's very positive. The key cost pressure, members, that is set out in the report is Christmas lights. You will see that significantly overspent, despite a substantial additional non-recurrent investment put in the 2021 financial outturn report. So this remains a key budget pressure that we need to address. The second key factor, members, we have a surplus of 458k, which relates to a positive rates finalisation. I think that's clearly due to a temporary reduction in debt write-offs by land and property services, which I believe will inevitably catch up in due course, and also the very significant rates relief provided to businesses by government during the 21-22 financial year. This positive position, members, I would believe is likely to be short-term, that because we do have that position where 25% of our non-domestic rate base is currently under appeal, and you'll be aware that we have our reserve set aside to mitigate against this, should that come back to bite us in due course. So the third key factor, we have a deficit of just over £1 million in relation to other costs. Those are detailed in Appendix 2. Key issues relate to voluntary severance costs, which have enabled significant recurrent savings in the recent rates process, an increase in our insurance claims provision, as well as 150k that we set aside during the rates process for rural capacity funding for the local growth partnerships. In addition to that, there's been a range of exceptional costs within other costs of 915k, and thankfully again they have been fully recouped from the Department for Communities and DERA funding. And the final component, members, is a deficit of 450k relating to reserves funding, and this relates to our updated reserves reduction policy that we agreed during the rates process, which requires the 450k to be carried forward to minimise rates implications. So, in conclusion, members, it's positive to report that the significant financial risks that we have been mitigated up to this point, and it's certainly a very positive year-end position. It's proposed that 68k surplus is transferred to our district fund, the updated position of which is set out in the table in section 4.4 of the report. So when considering the fact that some of our rates continue to be funded from reserves and our updated reserves reduction policy, that will leave us in a position where we're in compliance with the relevant guidance, and our district fund will sit at about 6.54% of our net expenditure. So just finishing off, members, by looking at our key reserve. Obviously, as I've mentioned earlier, moving forward, we do have significant major uncertainties in respect of our finances. We mentioned previously the hardship, cost of living, continued pandemic pressures, the pay pressures, and also, members, not to forget our very significant unfunded capital aspirations. So a number of those issues haven't been budgeted for the 22-23 rates process, as most of them were not known at the time and are continuing to evolve. And a lot of those issues, members, we would hope are short term, and we would like to be in a position to absorb those non-recurrently as opposed to putting them onto rates. So to do that, it's critical that we have robust reserves in place to deal with these issues and minimise those rates implications. So in that regard, you'll recall last year we set up a new financial commitments and contingencies reserve that was facilitated by the significant advanced government funding we received, as well as our contingency plan savings, and the updated position in relation to that fund is set out in Appendix 4. And obviously, members, that's a very important reserve, and that's set out in Appendix 4 for your consideration. A number of items in that reserve are ring-fenced. Obviously, Department for Communities funding we need to use for the purposes intended, but a number are council reserves which we have set up for the range of pressures that we face aside from that. So that reserve does place us in a strong position, members, to mitigate the many challenges we have in the short term for the upcoming financial year, and it also provides us with some contingency as we move towards a very challenging 23-24 rates process. And you'll be aware that a working group has been set up now to look at budgets and rates in detail in this regard, and this will commence meetings in the coming weeks. So, members, in terms of recommendations, it's recommended that you approve the draft 68k surplus position as set out in the report, and the updated position in respect of our financial commitments and contingencies reserve as set out in Appendix 4. And it's also recommended that you note the significant challenges that have been outlined in the report and that remain ahead. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks for letting me in, and just to thank Alfie and the staff members ahead of any of your comments for an exceptional few weeks of work in bringing this piece of work to a conclusion. It's a very highly pressurised time for the senior finance staff. So as Chief Executive, I really commend them in terms of, and the leadership of Alfie in getting to this position. It really is an incredibly detailed piece of work. In a very broad sense, members, just picking up on what Alfie has mentioned there, the newly established finance working group that is a past motion of a recent council meeting. A date is being sought for that at the moment and will be sent out in the next couple of weeks. And it's proposed that the first item on the agenda for that financial working group is to look at that reserve and the current pressures that are under, council is under this year, and how best to allocate that reserve against these existing pressures that Alfie has mentioned. So we hope to take that conversation forward with you through that group in the short few weeks to come.
Thank you, and thank you, Alfie, for that report as well. The first person that I have looking to come on there is Councillor Jackson.
Good Chair, and I want to take this opportunity to wish you well in the year ahead. And I want to thank Alfie for the report, the very detailed report, and all the work that's went on it on behalf of Sinn Féin. And I suppose it's only right to point out from the outset that we're in a positive position. That we're coming out of the year that's just been where there's a surplus. And if it wasn't for the substantial support that we received, particularly from the Department of Communities, we would be in a completely different situation. And I concur, and I can completely understand the financial pressures for council that's been quite clearly highlighted in the report. But one of the things that we need to take into consideration is that there's a lot of people right across our city and district that are facing very severe financial pressures as well. And there's a clear logic for using this additional £68,000. They go into the reserves, and I suppose in many ways that could be seen as being prudent, but we have to face up to the reality is that there's a lot of people out there that are really struggling with the rise in utility bills, with the rise in cost of living, and there is that hardship fund that's been established by council. They try and provide support, whatever support we can, and as a party we see this as an opportunity for us to bolster that hardship fund, and hopefully increase the amount of support that we're able to provide those that are in need within our city and district. So we're, as a party, and I know I'm not a member of this committee, so I can't make a proposal, but as a party, we're content with the recommendations, with the exception of the funding going into the reserves. We certainly note the financial pressures that council are facing. We certainly, I don't know, it was Councillor John McGowan that brought the motion to council in relation to the working group. So we certainly welcome the conversation in the year ahead. But for the here and now, we see this as an opportunity for us to provide additional funding into the hardship fund, and that's a proposal that will be coming from a member of our party. I can type it into the chat box, or I know I've spoke to Councillor Heaney beforehand, and he was content to make a proposal on that regard.
Okay. If you want to put the proposal under the chat box, it would have to be proposed officially by a member of the committee, but
I'm happy to propose that, Chair. Seconded, Chair.
so if a proposal on the floor, it's been seconded as well. Does anybody want to speak to the proposal?
Chair, can we see the proposal first, please?
Yeah, I'm just putting on the chat box there. Okay. So the proposal is now there in the chat box. If anybody does want to speak to it, if you could indicate, that would be. Alderman Devaney, are you looking to speak to the proposal or just the report in general?
Just a report in general, Chair.
Okay, I'll come back to you if that's okay.
It's okay.
Councillor Farrell, you were next there in my list, or?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to the paper and the proposal, and not
Okay.
an issue at all. So
Okay.
in terms of the paper in general, I think it's good news that we're bang on budget with a small surplus of £68,000 for last year. We didn't spend money we didn't have, and we kept a close eye on costs. So that's testament to the diligence and dedication of the entire team, especially Alfie. So we have significant challenges for the year ahead. We've got rising utility costs, we've got soaring inflation, we've got pension costs, and we've got pay pressures as well, which none of them have been budgeted for. So it's good that we're in this position where there's no overspend last year. In terms of the proposal to put the 68k from last year and the hardship fund, fully support that, not an issue at all. You know, we've got rising utility costs, but so does everybody out there. So we need to be looking after the community out there. So we're looking forward to the meeting on Friday, where we're actually going to discuss, you know, what tangible proposals and actions we can deliver because people are worried. Costs are rising. Wages aren't rising at the same level. So I think it's incumbent on us to do what we can. So happy to support the proposal. Happy to support the proposal to put the 68k under the Hardship Fund. Happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Farrell. Alderman McCready, were you looking to
Chair.
speak to the proposal or?
Chair, happy to speak on both, but firstly, just congratulations on your appointment as Chair, and as your deputy, I'll give you the support as and when you need it. Secondly, on this proposal, I'm happy to support and see it go through. And separately, or in addition to the paper, is I welcome the paper and I thank both John Alfie and that team, and I thank them for a meeting with myself and colleague Derek last week or the week before on some of the detailed discussion points behind all of this of how we've got to this draft at the moment. And so I do take note and I would accept this as a draft, notwithstanding this proposal if it does go through on that presumption. The kind of key points I want to kind of highlight or regurgitate from that meeting is that we can't make decisions we haven't budgeted for. And some of the issues which I take an observational concern at this point is we're in negotiating with with our employees in terms of the pay dispute. That's not quantified at all yet. So that working group is with a it should be done that matter had before to erect such a
Your connection
so,
seems to be breaking up
but then
there,
we just go
Alderman.
back into apologies. Can you hear me okay now, Chair?
Yep.
No, just last point is we need to be very careful of redistributing money when we haven't fully quantified those concerns. And the specific concern is we have an ongoing dispute with the unions, with our employees and our executive team. Nothing there has been quantified, so we don't know what that bill will be, but yet we're now moving around monies which were penciled in for reserves, notwithstanding the amount of money that we utilize. It's around 75 million there or thereabouts. And so the impact of inflation, utility, fuel, and all the other costs is huge. It really is significant. So we're going to have to call on those reserves at some point if the inflation does not get under control. So whilst I'll make an exception in this case because of the 68k, I know where it has come from. It is a surplus, and being redirected into the Council's Hardship Fund is certainly very appropriate and has my full support. But I look forward to getting into the detail at the meeting on Friday, which was just set up for a bit more probity and a bit more time for members to have a detailed conversation, specifically with the financial circumstances that we find ourselves in. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Alderman Devaney, I'm going to bring you back in there. If you want to speak on the report, we'll just take it as a whole.
That's lovely. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in, and I wish you well and your deputy in the year ahead in your new positions, and look forward to working with you. First of all, I just want to put on record the DEP's thanks to Alfie and the team here for a very, very detailed piece of work, and we're all aware of, this is a positive story, and, it comes with risks attached, as Alfie always keeps telling us, and yes, there are challenges ahead, as the previous speaker said, and around the pay agreement with staff and stuff like that there. But look, I do understand as well the financial pressure our citizens are under at the present moment, and around the cost of living, food and heat and everything is ongoing at the minute. It has actually gone through the roof, nearly gone mad, as one would say. But look, redistributing the 68k to the Hardship Fund, our party has no problem with either, but I think we just have to be mindful as we move on through the process of sorting out wages and other pressures that come, you know, how we distribute money and stuff like this. But at the moment, no problem with the report. Welcome it coming forward, and we have no problem in supporting that 68,000 being redirected into the Hardship Fund at this time. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that, Alderman Devaney. Councillor Barr?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alfie, for the report. I'd also like to wish you and the Vice Chair all the best in the coming year. I would concur with Councillor Jackson's sentiments, and I feel that given the current financial situation facing constituents in the district, there is an onus on us as a council to do what we can to alleviate the hardships currently being experienced. So I would be supportive of the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Alderman Hussey?
Thank you for permission to come in, Chair. I'm not a member of the committee, and like others, I wish you well in your term as you begin it, and indeed your deputy chair. Thanks to Alfie for the report, and indeed, as has already been alluded to by Alderman McCready, for the meeting that we did have with Alfie and others around this whole thing. It's just a clarification on the whole financial picture. Reference the year 2021-22, which is what we're referring to. How much of our income during that term would have been from previous surpluses, from previous reserves? And I'm asking that question because we've got to be mindful of this incoming year, 22-23, but also the year beyond that. And not tying ourselves to something which is going to then impact on council services. When you talk about hardship, you know, for many of the folk that I represent, hardship is actually, you know, lack of access to council facilities or inappropriate council facilities in their area. So that needs to be taken on board. So the basic question within the figures that have been presented to us on the income side, is it fair to say that there has been a utilisation of some reserve and previous surplus balance? So you know, I'm asking that question, as I say, with regard to future use of funds if they've been set elsewhere. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and Alfie, I don't know, do you want to come on that?
Yep, thank you, Alderman Hussey. The answer to your question is set out in Appendix 4. So it shows out of the financial commitments and contingencies reserve how much basically reserves we used to cover income during that year. And the figure in that is the second column, it's 4.78 million. Now, some of that is income that funds expenditure which won't be recurrent, but some of it funds expenditure that is, you know, recurrent expenditure. So for example, we used 1.84 million from our DFC COVID financial losses funding. That's clearly monies that we use to replace income, and not only income but costs that we incurred that were as a result of the pandemic. We also received we also utilised 734k in relation to rate support grant, for example, income that was obviously cut during the year. So that's the figure, it's that column in Appendix 4. So a good element of that is replacing expenditure or income that we would have received, but some element of it is also specific, where we only spent the funding because we got it essentially. So that answers your question. Thank you.
Chair, if I can come back briefly, I thank Alfie for that, and I think it justifies what I've been saying, and I would urge committee members to be circumspect and mindful of the overall picture and not just the short-term picture. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. Councillor Harkin?
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and good luck in your role as Chair of the meeting of the committee this year. And thank you, Alfie, for the report. And I suppose I have a few questions. Alfie, look, we had a previous discussion where we identified that there was a 3 million COVID reserve fund. Can you tell me where that money is now? Because that was obviously a proposal for a hardship fund. And while we support, you know, surplus going into such a hardship fund. Can you explain where that money is? Is that money gone now? Or is this a separate pot of money that would go into that? And similarly with the rate support grant as well, I know it's in the document there and in the report, but if you could just in layman's terms or layperson's terms explain where that money went, that would be incredibly helpful. As people have said, you know, look, I don't think that we should be having to thank the DFC for funding our council during the pandemic and a cost of living crisis. That's what a central government should be doing, especially in a district like ours, where we have unfortunately higher levels of deprivation and a lot of challenges. And everybody has referenced the cost of living crisis, and we need to do everything we can to help people through it. And unfortunately, that's not happening right now. And then the third thing is we you know, workers have taken strike action in our district, and that our council is in a position where we can negotiate some improvement for workers' terms and conditions. And it seems to me that you know, councils had yearly savings, but they haven't been invested necessarily into the workforce. That's not necessarily the fault of the of our officers, because of the way that the agreements have been reached with trade unions representing workers. But there's certainly a case for looking at reinvesting those savings into improving the terms and conditions of our workforce going forward, because that money it goes somewhere. So I suppose, Alfie, my question is if you could clarify where the COVID 3 million went and where the where the rate support grant funding, where that money went, if that is now spent, so to speak, in the report that you've given us. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. Again, I would refer you to Appendix 4. There's two separate pots of money that you've referred to. The first is the Contingency Fund that we set aside at the start of the pandemic, and that is 3.4 million. And it hasn't been spent. It sits in our Financial Commitments and Contingencies Reserve. You'll recall, following the recent hardship meetings, that we did a detailed presentation highlighting all the risks that we were supposedly setting aside that fund for, and they include utility cost increases, inflation, waste contract pressures, nil-GOS pension costs, the fact that when we come to next year's rates, we will likely be in the position that our leisure income will still be running behind and we won't be getting any losses funding anymore. So that fund of money is sitting in that reserve as we speak. Separately, we now have a new fund of money, largely accommodated by the rate support grant additional allocation we received in March. And that sum of money sits at 2.6 million. It also sits in that reserve. And at this minute in time, it has simply been called pay and hardship pressure. So that has, in this report, been earmarked for hardship and also the ongoing pay discussions that we're embarking on at this minute in time. So both funds of money are sitting in that reserve as set out in Appendix 4. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alfie. I don't have any other indicated speakers on this report, and I'm not hearing any discerning voices in terms of the proposal. So I'd be happy to take that forward with the proposal and seconder that's been noted. Perfect. Thank you for that, Alfie. That moves us on to item 8, which is the free ports and innovation zones, and on pages 47 to 50. And I'll pass over to Stephen Gillespie, who's going to take that report for us.
Thank you, Chair. So members will be aware of previous meeting of GSP in December 2020 when approval was given to work with Foyle Port, Belfast Harbour, Belfast City Council, and to consider the implications of the free port legislation in GB and how this might leave her in Northern Ireland a competitive advantage. The purpose of this report is to advise members of the progress to date and to share the draft document that has been prepared jointly. The draft report is clearly not a definitive position, as in terms of any competition for Northern Ireland, this has not been agreed yet. Instead, the report could form the basis of a submission subject to members' approval. For background, members will be aware of that there was a free port competition in England, and this has subsequently been followed up with Scotland in February 2022 and Wales in May 22 have now been agreed, and there is funding available for a free port if selected. The report supports the case for the stakeholders to further explore this work. The appraisal identifies the potential for a Northern Ireland Innovation Zone to use the levers of the free port policy to deliver innovation, sustainable economic growth for the region. The emerging model takes account of the specific circumstances that we face, and it looks to enhance investment, including innovation, skills, sustainable business model, and to get ready for future growth. The appraisal highlights that any NA bid will have to be constructed in a unique way. The appraisal also identifies a range of initial objectives for an innovation zone. This would be namely in the innovation, competitiveness and productivity, trade and investment, regeneration, and the net zero targets. It will also seek to enhance and support the city deals that exist, and any innovation zone will have to build on this investment through city deals. The emerging innovation model could support the delivery of the priorities, including innovation and green transition and further investment in skills. So the recommendations are that members are asked to note the contents of the report. We're seeking permission for officers to continue the work with partners to further explore this opportunity, and if a competition opens, then we would work on a joint submission for that competition. Clearly, any subsequent submission would need approval from members before a final submission would be made. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. The first indicated speaker on this report is Councillor Heaney.
Thanks, Chair, and like others, I'd like to just congratulate you and wish you well in your new role this year. I welcome the fact in the paper that the title of the paper said that we're moving away from even the terminology of free ports. And there's no innovation zone. Our party would have real concerns around the Tory-inspired free port model as it is rolled out in England. Ports have become tax havens. There's been issues with workers' rights and a range of concerns for us to get down that particular road. We know the motivation behind the Tory. So if we are crafting a bespoke model for here that we are proposing that eliminates the issues that I've mentioned, plus obviously the specific issue that we would have here in relation to this all compliant, which my understanding the free port model wouldn't be, then that's something we'd be happy to look at and agree that council officers should continue to work on a proposal. So I just want to put those concerns around the free port element of thing on the record here as council officers work take it forward. I suppose I do have a question. It's my understanding that Belfast have moved away from this particular initiative or the process of. So if that is the case, what impact does that have on what council officers are currently working on, and what are we proposing to put forward in its place? So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Stephen, if you want to come on that question or stick them all together, no bother, that's grand. So the next speaker I've indicated is Councillor Hirkin.
Thanks again, Chair. Yeah, look, I know it says innovation zone, but this is still a free port because that's the initiative has come from the Tories who are pushing these free ports on these islands, and they're pushing them through across the world as well. And look, free ports, as we know, are magnets for, money laundering, tax evasion, corruption, smuggling, counterfeiting, and the undermining of workers' rights. That's why corporate oligarchs like the people who own P&O ferries are so enthusiastic about them, and that's why they're partnering up with the British government to promote these all across the world. Now, so it's my understanding that the Belfast City Council Growth and Regeneration Committee has voted now not to be part of this because of these very concerns, and not that we should follow what Belfast does, but that if very serious concerns are being raised in the Belfast City Council, who we're partnering with, I think we have to take that on board. Now, we've and others have consistently raised these concerns about what our council is engaging in here. We've been told it's a different model. I read the report and I see things about tax incentives, this is the key part of these zones. It's about tax avoidance. It's about and that seems to be at the heart of the proposal, that big corporations would get to kind of deregulate away from taxing and everything else, which has a huge impact as well on that. Deregulation tends to have a big impact on workers' rights. If Belfast Council pulls out of this, along with Belfast Harbour, what impact does that have? And I've also read that Larnport would at a certain point be involved in this. And again, Larnport is owned by the DP World corporate oligarchs who own P&O Ferries, which this council has now agreed should be has passed a motion calling for us to boycott P&O Ferries, and also for that port to be brought under public control. So that I'm just wondering how that would work in terms of the Larnport being involved in this as well. And people may have seen that the Dumfries and Galloway Council as well has basically agreed to drop the proposal for a free port for Cairnryan port as well, out of concern about P&O Ferries involvement. So there just seems to be a lot of factors at play here in terms of the corporate oligarchs being involved and the outcome of these free ports ending up undermining economic growth, undermining workers' rights, and being a magnet for many things that I think that this council would be opposed to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin, and Stephen's going to take all questions and answer afterwards. So I'm going to pass over to Councillor Tierney, who was the next indicated speaker.
Thank you, Chair. And before I get into the report, on behalf of the SDLP, just to wish you well in your year as Chair. Look, I understand some of the concerns that have been raised by other members around the tax issues and the workers' rights issues. I think in terms of this particular report, regardless of what has gone through Belfast City Council, we have a decision to make. And I think Councillor Heaney made a very important point, that the title of this report is now Innovation Zones. It's no longer talking about a free port. And I think we have an opportunity to design something that works for us here in Derry and Strabane, where we can incorporate all of the concerns that people have around the workers' rights issues, around all of the tax issues and things like that. That's why I welcome 5.3 of the report that says any further submission would have to be approved by members first of all before it goes. If we are serious about economic growth in this city and district, then we have to investigate every possible opportunity that comes our way. And this, whilst it has some concerns, it is at the minute a possible opportunity to create economic growth in this council district. We are at the wrong end of every league table that you don't want to be near. And if we are serious about trying to improve the lives of the people across this city and district, improve the opportunities, then we have to look at every possible opportunity, but we have to look at them very carefully and make sure that whilst we're doing that, that we're making sure that workers who may be lucky enough to get a job out here, that their workers' rights are protected, and that we're looking after all of that. I also think, there's a massive area down at Foylport, including down and around the airport and other subsequent lands, where we could actually make a real go of something down here if we are creative enough to think outside the box. And it is all, I suppose, hinging on whether a competition actually opens or not. So we're happy to support the recommendations. We're, I suppose, cautiously moving toward in the direction of putting on a bid, whether that be a single bid or a joint bid. I think it's up to this council. If Belfast City Council, and I understand that they have voted it down on Thursday night,
If Belfast City Council don't want to be involved, then that's for Belfast City Council. We have a decision to make here, and I think that that's important that we do that. Belfast City Council are a partner in this process as much as we are. If they don't want to be involved, then that's for them to worry about. But when you look at the economic opportunities that Belfast have compared to what we have here in Derry and Strabane, Belfast are in the unfortunate or in the fortunate position where they can turn opportunities like this down. We have to try and maximise everything that we have, every income generator that we have coming into this council district. So at this stage, Chair, we're happy to continue and give backing for officers to continue working on a bid. And I know Stephen's going to address a number of the questions, but I think in terms of the recommendations, the word joint may need to come out of the recommendations. But we're happy to continue and allow officers to continue working on a possible bid if a competition does open. But we're doing that very, very cautiously and we will be making sure throughout the process that all of the concerns that we have that have been floated about here are addressed. And, you know, I think whenever people are talking about the Freeport model that you may see in England that some may say does or doesn't work, we have to remember that Scotland operate a completely different model. And there's a possibility if a competition opens for the north that we can operate an even different model and a bespoke model that works for us here in Derry and Strabane. And if that's a possibility and it's going to create income and create economic growth in this city and district, then the SDLP are backing it at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. The next indicated speaker there is Alderman McCready.
Thank you, Chair. This is the item which I raised a declaration of interest as a member of the Port Commissioners. Now, that aside, I support the concept of a Freeport model, whether that be called an innovation zone, a free enterprise zone. The title is largely irrelevant. It's the detail of the model which in actuality will remove some of the concerns or enhance some of the economic opportunities which we've never had here before. And my concern is more with the local authority and our members. If we do not endorse or support an appropriate model, an innovation zone for our region, this goes beyond our council area. This is northwest region, cross-border, including neighbouring councils within Northern Ireland and further afield into the Republic. This is massive. The magnitude of this hasn't really been acknowledged when we've discussed this in chamber. Now, admittedly, I have the benefit of more detail as it working on behalf of a different stakeholder, which would come under the joint aspect of this, which is the Foyle Port. So I've seen the detail and I've seen the opportunity and one that we should take. Notwithstanding the legitimate concerns of history repeating itself with regards to what a free port was on the mainland Britain years ago, we have an opportunity for a bespoke model specifically for us. Design it how we want. We can tease out the issues we don't want and bring in the opportunities that we do want. That's there on a plate for us, but we just need to take it. Irrespective of what Belfast or any other stakeholder does, is a matter for them. We as a council corporately must have a firm, confident commitment to this so we can attract, whether it's foreign direct investment or anything else along that nature. A really good example, I'll leave you with this, Chair, is I think it was back in the 1950s. It was the Shannon Port. They were a small time operation. They took on a similar concept of a free port model, which suited them, a Shannon free zone, and attracted so much investment. Yes, there was tax incentives and reductions, but it created 8,000 jobs for people. They're local people. Why are we not doing the same for us here? Because I routinely hear in this chamber that we're always at the bottom of the league when it comes to any tables with deprivation or social economic issues. This is the chance to get us in the Premier League. Let's get behind it and let's take it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for that, Alderman McCready. Alderman Devaney, it's the last speaker I've indicated so far, and then we'll bring in Stephen.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in, and we welcome the DEP welcomes the report coming forward here, by Stephen. But I do take on board some concerns from others, you know, talking about tax havens and workers' rights and stuff like that there. And I do believe Councillor Tierney got it right. He did say, look, you know, at the end of the day, we need to maximise every opportunity. And I think if we don't try and maximise this opportunity, it will be a lost opportunity for us here in the Northwest and the region. And, you know, at the end of the day, I do believe that we should support this. But we are very mindful of the other issues that have been raised. And, you know, we can, as we go through, if a call does come out or a bid comes out, we can shape that bid whatever shape we want it to ensure look that these tax havens aren't what some people are saying, and workers' rights are looked after. And Chair, look, I've been around long enough in council now, and I've listened to more you know, businesses come to across Northern Ireland, they go bust after 10 years, and then you really read then how much incentives they got. They got tax incentives, they got the low interest rates and stuff like that there, and they're away in 10 years. So it's nothing new to us, these incentives to encourage businesses. But Chair, just to put it on the record, we would support it here with the cautiousness of looking how if a bid did come, how we may shape that and around that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Devaney. Alderman Devaney. I've just got two more speakers, Stephen, so I'll take them first if that's okay. Alderman Hussey.
Thanks for the opportunity, Chair. Much appreciated. Similar to Councillor Tierney, Alderman McCready, clearly, and Alderman Devaney, I think members need to be mindful of the actual recommendation, which is to explore the opportunity, and what will develop out of it is a bespoke solution to what's desired. And all of the concerns that have been raised by others earlier on in the debate can be addressed within such a bespoke solution and application in the subsequent submission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Donnelly.
Chair, and wish you luck in your new appointment. There's definitely, you know, we all need proper investment. We need things done right, but I just thought once.
Sorry, your line seems to be really bad, Councillor Donnelly. I can't make out what you're saying, and the people in the chamber can't either.
Hello? Can you hear me, Chair? Can you hear me, Chair?
It's muffled at the minute, the sound.
Oh. Yeah, it's okay. I'm abstaining anyway. I would just want to explain that. I'm not sure if you can hear me or not.
You're abstaining. Is it that you're abstaining, Councillor Donnelly, on this item? Yep. Okay. That's noted. So I'll hand over to Stephen. He's going to take the questions that were put forward there.
You, Chair, and I'll take some of the specific questions and go through some of the other points as well. I mean, clearly everything that's been said is extremely valid. I mean, this is the direction of travel that we'll be moving in terms of how we have a bespoke that is going to suit us. In terms of Belfast position, Belfast has been very clear now, following their committee meeting and subsequent ratification of council, that they will not be pursuing this opportunity any further. So our natural partners are Foyleport. And we'd always set this up and always talk through members that this was a joint position at this point in time. But depending on what the competition was, it may well have meant that we would have had to separate anyway, and depend on the competition. So we don't know what the competition is yet. But what we've started to do is put ourselves in front of that and decide what do we want. And I think that's really important. And the members have picked that up, you know, extremely well through all the conversations, that this is an opportunity for us to shape what we want for this region, and in working with our partner in Foyleport. So, and obviously the issues around workers' rights, potential tax havens, etc., were all very well articulated previously, and they were part of the submission, and they are all part of what we're working on to make sure that does not happen. This is about investment, and this is about a potential opportunity. But the whole caveat in, and that's why 5.3 is there, is nothing will be decided unless members are in agreement. So even if we work our way through this with Foilport and we come up with something that addresses the competition, if members are not happy at that point in time, then clearly we don't go any further. And that's the absolute caveat that is there. But it allows the officer team and the officers at Foilport to continue to work with this, to continue to have those discussions, and as they potentially put ourselves in an influencing position in terms of what will potentially come out of a competition from government at a point in time later this year, hopefully. So hopefully that addresses all the questions. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, I would need a proposer. Oh, sorry, John was looking on there. Go ahead. Apologies.
Chair, and just to build on what Stephen has said, totally endorse what he said and totally understand the comments of members, the concerns of members. But just to be clear, this is not a Freeport model. A Freeport model will not work in Northern Ireland because of the current circumstances here. And that's why there isn't a competition open. That's why we're not in a situation where there's a current live bid process. Our understanding through informal discussions is the Treasury would like to see something coming from Northern Ireland that is bespoke to Northern Ireland. Hence our reach out to Belfast to try to make sure that we didn't get into a competition situation with Belfast where frequently we're the loser. And so as we move forward with this particular proposal, if we're now in a situation where we're moving forward under ourselves, that allows us to further tweak the model to ensure that it's got greater local benefit and greater local characteristics that are the decision of this chamber and its stakeholders. The one thing I would say is that if a competition opens, or indeed if this informs a process that opens a competition, it will require the approval of the Northern Ireland Executive as things currently stand. So we will have to, at some point along this journey, ensure that whatever it is we devise here locally receives regional support from the Executive as well. And that's the indications that Treasury would be suggesting to us, is that they want to see this come forward as something that is acceptable, both at regional level and local level. That obviously can be achieved. We're a long way away from that, but that brings us into the space again of just what it looks like, the shape of it, and how we take this forward. But the first steps are to design something that works for this region, that has got the approval of you as elected members, and then takes it forward on that basis.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that, John. So at this stage, we would need a proposer and seconder for the recommendations that are in the paper.
Chair, I'm happy to propose.
And Alderman Rennie, I'll second it.
And it's noted there that Councillor Donnelly has chosen to abstain on this item as well. You looking to? Councillor Tierney?
Yeah, and I know it's been proposed and seconded. It's just the whole thing around the executive endorsement. And I know that's a long, long way off, and there isn't even a competition open, but we don't have an executive. Let's be frank about it. What does that look like? How do we, or what route do we go down? Are they going to take endorsement from individual shadow type ministers, or what way? And I know it's a long way off, and it's not something that we need to worry about now. Let's design the thing and get it ready and get the competition opened and all of that. But it's just to sort of clear it up in our mind.
Okay.
Sure. Look, it is a long way off, and I mirror this process a little bit to the city deal process, whereby government have put out an opportunity, but it's up to each local area to define what that opportunity looks like. And so we're quite a long way away from that. But ultimately, the city deal process did require the engagement and approval of the Northern Ireland Executive, and Treasury have indicated at this stage, but it's still a long way off, that that's their preferred route in this instance as well. Obviously, depending on circumstances at any given time, that may vary. And of course, those conversations took place some time ago prior to the current situation. So I wouldn't be concerned about it at this minute in time. But the issue in terms of moving forward as a joint proposition was to try to ensure that we minimise the competitive nature of any particular bid process. But this does afford us a unique opportunity to look at it from a local perspective.
Thank you, John. Happy enough? Right. Okay, so we'll move on. That report has now been proposed and seconded, and council officers can continue on that work and scoping out what that'll look like for us. That moves us on now to items that are open for information. I'm just going to take them together. If anybody wants to raise any issues from the items that are there, you indicate that would be. Nobody? Okay. No problem. So that moves us under confidential. If I can get a proposer to go into confidential, Councillor Mooney, and Councillor Hooney's happy to second. So just give it a wee second there.